Well, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill has voted via their board of trustees to funnel a lot of money that was spent previously on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, so DEI, into public safety. This just happened this week. And we can put the first element up on the screen. This is the headline from The Guardian, a $2.3 million DEI budget now going to safety and policing. The chairman of the board, his name is David Baliek, told the Raleigh News and Observer that he expected jobs would be eliminated, quote, as a result of the reallocation. He said, "My personal opinion is that there's administrative bloat in the university. Any cuts in administration and diverting of dollars to rubber meets the road efforts like public safety and teaching is important." Now, UNC became somewhat of a flashpoint in the greater encampment debate, because we're going to skip ahead with the elements here. We can put this VO up on, this is C3, of the fraternity brothers protecting the American flag after some protesters had tried to take it down, according to reporting Fox News, and replace it with a Palestinian flag. This went massively viral. I think they got like a $10,000 donation from Bill Ackman on a GoFundMe, although there were different fraternities who were getting donations and were going viral for doing things like this. But that, again, sort of thrust this back into the spotlight for UNC. Obviously, there have even been academic studies on this point. The rolling back of DEI spending has kind of happened across the board. Academia, it's happened in corporations. But I would argue, and have interviewed people in who watch this in the corporate space, some of it is actually not really being rolled back. It's being rolled back in name, and then you're seeing it still happen intentionally in other places, kind of being disguised and obfuscated rather than fully abandoned. But in the case of UNC here, it's actually really being fully abandoned. I think jobs will be lost. Well, last thing I'll point out, Ryan, before I toss it to you, because you have some interesting thoughts on this I'm excited to get to, is that when the president of the board said that they have administrative bloat, he's right. There was a Progressive Policy Institute, sort of, Ryan, would you describe them as kind of third way, E?
They're linked third way.
They're literally third yeah. They're like third way's think tank. Yeah. They had so by that we mean kind of centrist, but they had a report looking at the student to faculty ratio at the top 50 universities that was released just last fall. So this is very recent. They found that there are 3 times as many non-faculty members as there are faculty per student at the top 50 schools in the United States. That's new. That's a shift. That's something that's happened over the course of many years. So just a lot of people's student loan is paying for some of the positions that might be eliminated. And maybe rather than reallocating $2.3 million, you want to give that to public safety. You might want to give that back to students, but actually neighboring Duke has one of the worst non-faculty to student ratios. And when I say one of the worst, they literally have more non-faculty than students at Duke. The ratio at UNC is 3.5 students to 1 non-faculty, so that's administrative position, basically. Obviously, you need some of those positions, but part of the reason that universities have been on this hiring spree is because of the constant increase in student loan potential. Ryan, I don't know if we even disagree on this, but basically when you have the massive subsidy in the form of loans, students are able to keep affording colleges, so the college just keeps marking up the prices, and that's definitely what's happened across the board. And what they've done with a lot of that money is hire administrators, have gotten into this administrative arms race. They've also had like the Lazy River arms race that's happened too. But you flagged an argument from Sam Adler-Bell that I was really interested in getting to as well. Yes,
Sam Adler-Bell has been one of my ninja comrades over the years in fighting the kind of pro-DEI left from the left. And I say ninja because the attacks just keep coming.
Right.
And we're going to just keep fending them off.
Keep fielding them, yeah.
So these 2 tweets are in response to NYU faculty and staff for Justice in Palestine putting out a statement that said that NYU is punishing arrested students by requiring them to complete, quote, reflection papers and completion of, quote, integrity modules. And so this is the kind of students are protesting against what the DEI office is kind of punishing them with. So Sam says, for what it's worth, I do think this stuff should force the left to rethink its hostility to the more sophisticated arguments against the DEIification of university administration. If this sounds to you like, quote, forced re-education and repudiation in response to thought crimes, unquote, maybe we should all reconsider the paradigms that have made this seem an appropriate response to political speech. So what he is saying there is that if you feel like you're being lectured to and re-educated by the administration just for stating your political opinion, that Palestinians deserve justice, that Palestinians should not be the victims of an ethnic cleansing, that the university ought to divest from the Israeli military industrial complex. And they respond to you by this insane, making you write reflection papers and telling you that you've committed thought crimes. And what he's saying there is that flip it over, flip it around. Think about that from another perspective. You don't like it that the administration is telling you that you're guilty of wrong things, that you're thinking the wrong things. You don't like that, do you? You should be able to think for yourself. Apply that to everybody. Take ownership of your own independent thought process. Don't outsource it to administrators.
Yeah.
Don't let them be the arbiters of what is good and what is bad, what is right is what is wrong. And I'm an old man yelling at clouds, but what I have been yelling at this cloud for several years now is that this active empowering of administrators is counter to the kind of free-thinking, people power that the left is supposed to be about. Like when back in the 90s and 2000s, and before that, people were protesting against the administration. The protests over the last 10, 15 years are demands that more administrators be hired to cover particular areas, and that more offices be created.
Yeah.
And
driven by Obama-era Title IX policies.
And now those offices are being turned, predictably, as predicted, back against the left.
Yeah.
So stop doing that.
You're bankrupting working class people. You're bankrupting people on their way.
Yourself.
Bankrupting people as they are on their way in the course of upward mobility, supposedly, as they're claiming their ticket to the middle class that higher education is supposed to be, plunging people tens of thousands of dollars into debt, in large part to finance a thought regime, basically, and an inflexible thought regime at that. And I think it took a lot of people on the left, and I don't think the broader left is still cued into this, basically, but it took people a little bit to realize that these thought regimes actually are really restrictive. Not a lot of sympathy for the conservative students who end up on the wrong side of it and have for decades, but especially over the course of the last decade, post-Title IX, Obama-era regulations and post-cancel culture and all of that, wasn't a lot of sympathy for conservative students, but this stuff is actually wrong. It is actually meant to advance the interests of people who are using it as window dressing for their basically neoliberal politics. And it's disgusting and it's hollowing out. It's contributing to the hollowing out of the middle class. We have people spilled blood to create laws in this country that forbid discrimination on a racial basis, a sexual basis, that we have a lot of laws on the books. To do that, college campuses are unique environments. I think especially in terms of questions like sexual assault, these are really serious conversations. But to say that these administrations have become bloated is even an understatement. We have just blown up universities in the name of now creating thought restrictions, whatever that make people.
And meanwhile, not only is the budget now being sent over to cops, which, like we said earlier, is like an Onion headline. But the overreach has empowered the Stephen Millers of the world to then fight back against all efforts to advance civil rights and advance diversity in hiring and in acceptance in general across the board. It's just the baby is just getting thrown out with the bathwater, because I'm somebody who thinks that, look, if you're grappling with the legacy of racism, things don't just go away on their own because you just want them to. It takes actual affirmative action on the part of a society to grapple with those legacies. And so even if that means what the NFL called the Rooney Rule, which is like, look, there's just a subtle sense in the NFL back in the, it's not as pronounced as it used to be at all. But for years, there were no black head coaches. And no black head coaches were even no assistant coaches were even getting interviewed for the jobs. So they created a rule that said you have to interview somebody who's black or who's at least non-white. We're not saying you have to hire them, but for God's sake, just stop this thing where you just call your 4 friends. Like all your friends are white. And if you don't break that cycle, that's just going to be how it propels forward. And so the rule is interview some. And then turned out like, oh wow, this guy's really good. And we want to win. So we're hiring this guy. And so even though he's not in our social circle, he's not our friend. So you do need, I think, if you're going to break the legacy, and if you want a legacy to become a legacy rather than an ongoing part of your culture, you need some intervention like that. Instead, this DEI ideology metastasized and took over and became its own thing, and then was rightly targeted by everybody. And some nefarious people like Miller are going to use it to toss everything out.
It's definitely going to swing the pendulum, or risk swinging the pendulum back in the other direction. Like if I'm on the left, I would have the exact concerns that you do, and I even on the right have concerns that there are people who will take it too far. But this is, probably not an example of that. Although I would just give the money back to the students in some way or another, because $2.3 million, it's chump change to a university. But there's got to be a better use for it, certainly than the DEI administrators. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.
Help us build independent news and get the full show every morning at breakingpoints.com.